Steve Witkoff has never been to Ukraine,
Brilliant.
according to what I read in the Times this morning. I mean, I don't know how you can be a peace envoy for president and not go and visit both relevant countries.
We've been on air this morning. We've learned that European leaders are ready to go to Washington next week to meet President Trump to try to strengthen the 28-point peace plan for Ukraine. Contrary to initial reports, it seems that Sir Keir Starmer will not go. Presumably he doesn't want to be out of the country during budget week, which is going to be a big one. The President of the United States says Volodymyr Zelenskyy will have to like it, and if he doesn't like it, they should just keep fighting. Nikki, is this a situation whereby Zelenskyy is going to just have to accept this deal, actually? Should he accept it?
Well, just to say, to start off with, I was out for dinner with some friends last night, and we just said how relentlessly bad the news is. And I have to say, the three topics we got this morning just capture really just how much news there is around and how none of it is terribly uplifting. And I think this first story is, I mean, it's so depressing. It's just so inevitable that this is where Donald Trump would get to as he tries to. I'm afraid he's never understood the Ukrainian position. His sympathies, it feels, have always lain with Russia. And Steve Witkoff has been allowed to negotiate a truly terrible so-called deal for Ukraine. I think. I mean, I think Peter Ricketts is right, which is that if President Zelenskyy were to accept this, then that will be the end of his tenure. And perhaps he doesn't care about that. He'll care about the country. And I think that this is a moment that the European allies are going to have to step up even more. Totally understand, as you say, budget week, why Keir Starmer wouldn't want to be out of the country, but equally going to Washington. But I'm honestly not sure if that's going to be enough. And I think the European allies are going to have to they're just going to have to accept that maybe this is the end of the road for, a lot of US involvement. And they are going to have to step up and side with Ukraine. I just don't see how Ukraine can accept this deal. And my hunch actually is that President Putin ultimately will find a way to slide out of it because he needs a war for to keep his country under control and to keep his economy going. So I'm not sure that he's interested particularly in peace either.
Yeah, I think part of what you're getting at there, Nikki, and Latika come in on this, is that the European countries so far have been quite filled, outspoken, but really, what have they done? What have they achieved? The fact we're at this point, first of all, with a deal that is pro-Russia, basically, on the table, but then also, if Zelenskyy did accept it, it would presumably be as a result of him not succeeding in the way he would hope to on the battlefield, and that's on the Western leaders too, by not offering enough support.
Absolutely. Ultimately, if there is any sort of peace or negotiation forced upon Ukraine with any terms that they don't want, and by the way, the mood in Ukraine has been realistic for some point, for many, many months, I would say years now, about what they actually think they can walk away with here. Ukraine is not the problem in terms of wanting to negotiate a peace. It's always been Russia. But ultimately, if Russia succeeds here, it will, of course, be on Donald Trump. And that is a stain upon America. And it is a stain upon what Americans stand for. But it is ultimately Europe's problem that they were not able to stand up and defend Ukraine when it mattered. And for all the talk, and I think a key example here is the frozen assets. They have been talking for years about trying to unblock these frozen assets. And guess who's been eyeing them off? Donald Trump and Vladimir Putin. As part of this peace agreement, they want to cook up a deal where they take back those assets, spend some of it for reconstruction on Ukraine, but even the United States would stand to profit from that deal if that were to go ahead. Those assets could and should have been seized by Europe months and months ago. They're still talking about it. The block is Belgium because they're worried about the risks of being sued or having their own assets seized overseas. It's understandable. But if there was ever a time to take a risk, it is now. And now Europe's entire security could be put at risk because of dithering on issues like that.
Yeah, I suppose, Nikki, then all of this comes to the fundamental question. Is it then in Ukraine's interest and in the interest of the people of Ukraine for the war to be prolonged for another year?
And that's what is such a difficult question for President Zelenskyy to find an answer to. I mean, I don't think no leader of a country should want to prolong a war in which their citizens are dying. this is such an unjust war. This is about history. This is about land grab ambitions of Russia. This is about sort of confused reasoning, and Putin wanted to distract from his own domestic situation. But I mean that's that's why it's an almost Trump has managed to put Zelenskyy in an almost impossible position to know, and I think Latika is absolutely right about things like Europe's inaction on the issues around the frozen assets and the rest of it. I think Zelenskyy will need to know, and in a way, I sort of worry the European allies going to Washington, fine, but actually where they should be probably is in Kyiv, setting out exactly what they're going to do to support Zelenskyy should he decide to fight on.
Yeah.
And that might enable President Zelenskyy to actually make a slightly easier decision about the continuing danger in which many of his citizens find themselves.
Imagine Trump went to Kyiv to meet the leaders there.
Well, exactly. I mean, he hasn't gone to South Africa. He has made
G20.
no efforts to go. Apparently, so Steve Witkoff has never been to Ukraine, according to what I read in the Times this morning. I mean, I don't know how you can be a peace envoy for president and not go and visit both relevant countries.
Yeah. Let's see.
Interestingly, Callum, when I was last in Kyiv, I interviewed Alexander Moresko. He's the chair of the Rada, so the Ukrainian Parliament's Foreign Affairs Committee. And he said that exactly to me. He was like, Trump should come here. And by the way, if he does come here, he'll be welcomed like a rock star. I thought that was really interesting. And when you're in Kyiv, you hear this a lot from people saying, please come because you'll have a greater understanding of this country and what exactly we're fighting. It's not just a Russian invasion today. This is a deep, innate Russian colonial imperialist mindset. And Ukrainians know they're in this war for a long term. Even if this peace is negotiated now, you don't find people in Ukraine who think this war would end the minute that ceasefire starts. They think this is a long-term struggle. And that's also something that Europe will be considering when they sit down trying to strengthen this peace plan.
Yeah. It's interesting, actually, because if he was to be greeted like a rock star just now, if a peace deal like this one was accepted, and then Trump went along to sort of claim credit for it, I wonder if it would be a similar reception or actually if it might not be at that point.
Yes, I think so. Yeah. I think it would be very different.
I don't think he'd go, would he?
No, presumably he wouldn't if it was unpopular. I do wonder about Zelensky's role in all this as well, Nikki. There's been talk throughout this process that he might just have to take the hit, sign a peace deal, any peace deal, because then it brings peace, and then he gets, becomes the fall guy almost, gets booted out of office.
Look, I mean, I don't know whether President Zelenskyy, his continuation in office is any part of his continuation. I mean, I know that the people think that politicians want to stay in office, forever, and some do. He's had a heck of a ride as president, and I suspect he and his family have, under this most massive personal pressure as well. But the trouble is, his legacy could then be. I mean, I think Latika is right, which is that even if a peace deal was signed, now this week, actually, as I say, my hunch is that Putin will absolutely come back for more, and so peace is not secured, and therefore Zelensky's legacy would be the person who signed out this peace deal, in November 2025, and the war started up again. He left office, and then the war started up again in a matter of months. So actually, he sold out for no purpose. So I'm sure that would be part of his calculation too.
And Callum, this is a good there's good context to this because Zelensky's just had this massive corruption scandal blown open in Ukraine. He's very weak politically. He's probably the weakest he's ever been. Really? And Russia and the White House have used this timing very deliberately. I do wonder actually if there's a way this might rally Ukrainians back around Zelenskyy in the way that they did after the White House showdown, because the bit no one really says out loud a lot is Zelensky's not that popular in Ukraine anymore and hasn't been for some time. There's been a lot of concerns about his very small, centralized way of governing, and the clock is ticking on his presidency one way or the other. And of course, they can't have elections until they're out of martial law. And you will notice in this peace plan, one of the demands is that Ukraine holds elections within 100 days. Yeah. So it is worth considering that context as we examine why the US has decided to strike now and Russia has decided to strike now with this peace plan.